Hi, I am Doc LQJ. Welcome to Familiar Bonds July broadcast. I want to first start off by thanking you guys for your diligence and your patience in working with me this month, as I know this month's broadcast came at the end of the month, and there is a reason for that. I intend to release the broadcast now mid month so that people have a little bit of time to kind of settle into the month and then absorb the theme from the previous month and apply some of those principles, the material that was released, to kind of have some time to talk about that and move on into the next month with family and friends and other people who are impacted by the messages that I am delivering. Familiar Bonds, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of background about the company so that you understand kind of the purpose of this particular platform, is more than a psychotherapy practice. I am a master's level marriage and family therapist, and I transitioned from medical doctor because I felt the need to be in the community in such a way that I impacted the lives of people more from an emotional and a mental health stance. And I always talk about mental fitness because that's what I think the world is missing at this point: mental and emotional fitness. We take the time out to do everything but manage the most important element of us. Our mental health, our emotional health affects the rest of our health. Our physical health is contingent upon these two elements. And even to go a step further, our spiritual health and wellness is the foundation of all things us. And when you are emotionally and mentally fit, and what that means is to have those elements in check, you're more functional and you're able to be in the game of life in a way like no other. I think it's so important that we, as people who are systemically connected to one another, look out for the other person. Because at the end of the day, no one is in this fight alone. We can't do anything by ourselves. And sometimes when we think we can, we're oftentimes reminded that we need to stay connected because that's the nature of being human. So I am Doc LQJ. I am the founder of this company, and I'm the face of the company as well. For now, anyway. It is my intent to impress upon people the importance of staying connected. Also, it's always my intent to help people achieve the greatness within themselves. And not only achieve it, but first of all, recognize that piece and become one with that. Become a person that is true to living in their truth. And that sort of encompasses everything that motivated me to start this company, everything that motivated me to start this movement towards destigmatizing mental health and wellness. Because at the end of the day, I think that society is taking a stance towards mental health, and it's not a positive one. You know, it basically looks like everybody in the world thinks that if someone is seeing a helping professional, they're the ones with the problem. I want to clear that up first because I feel like that's important, right? The way that you perceive these things definitely determine whether or not you are engaged with them. And even if you are engaged with them one way or another, it determines to what extent, right? So let's just talk about what mental and emotional health looks like. Okay. Mental and emotional health means, or it equals functionality, optimal functionality in the life that we lead every day. Does it mean that we're problem free? Of course not. It means that the problems, the issues that we have in our life that present themselves on a day-to-day basis are easily or complexly resolved through collaborative problem solving efforts. Sometimes, if it's just us using our internal systems, or it's us accompanied by a professional, or us accompanied by a family member who has been equipped with the tools to resolve those inner conflicts or those external conflicts that cause internal distresses for us. I think it's really important that we not only remain connected, but I think it's really important that we also remind other people that they should remain connected, that they should be involved in one another's lives. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll jump into the meat of what this month's theme is all about. Finding comfort in being lost. Finding comfort in being lost. Okay? And I know that's like a ginormous step towards what most people would consider a negative direction, because nobody wants to be lost. Everybody wants to be found. But before you were found, where were you? Before you can be found, before you can be anything, there is a certain level of discovery that has to take place in order for us to know who we are, what our purpose is, and where we fit in life, and how other pieces of the puzzle fit into our major puzzle called life. So let's just look at that, okay, and see what that looks like. And then we'll talk a little bit about discerning schizophrenia from a couple of other psychotic disorders that are in the DSM. We'll talk about the DSM-5 a little bit, as you know, the world of psychology, American Psychology Association, moves and delves into the more research-based areas of DSM development, because the next one should have more of an expanded view on some other disorders like personality. I think it's more like a personality spectrum disorder, if I were to, kind of explain it for the professionals who are watching this. But we'll delve into that a little bit later in the video. So just for a second now, we're going to talk about in detail all of the intricate pieces of the puzzle that are important to us being lost, okay? Before we go down the rabbit hole of self-discovery, we have to be lost first. We have to be wondering. And what that means and what that translates to, for some of you who are familiar with terminology in the helping field, is being vulnerable, okay? So being vulnerable means that you're open to receive, but you're also open to express what really is there. So you're open to receive advisement, new adventures in life, new things in life, new ideas, new concepts that are not already embedded inside of you and moving. But it also says that you're vulnerable enough to show who you really are, to show where you really are in life, and to sit in that space, to live in your truth. None of us are perfect. None of us. And when I say that, I think that a lot of people don't really want to grasp and hold on to the things about us that are impure, imperfect, and need work. But those things are the things that makes us uniquely who we are. Being lost is not something that is negative. Being lost says that you are able to discover something new. If everybody in the world were born knowing who we are, knowing what our purpose was, nobody would have ambition to do anything new. No one would have any type of direction when it comes to, you know, where it is that we need to grow, because growth wouldn't be something that was a factor. Okay. And I talk about growth and maturation and discerning the two. The line of delineation is growth is an inevitable evolutionary thing. Okay. Maturation means that we're taking whatever experiences that we are being placed right in the middle of during the growth process, and we're learning something from it. We're learning something from it in a way that when we see that thing again, or when we do something that is affiliated or associated with that thing, the things that we learned from that prior experience is now elevated. Those things are now elevated. We've got skills that we've allowed to be able to be molded, curated, so that we can approach this from a different lens next time, and maybe we can have an even more positive outcome, or a positive outcome if we had a negative one previously. So that's one piece, right, of being lost and taking comfort in that vulnerability, right? But another thing about being lost is that you allow yourself the type of self-discovery that is not particularly guided in any direction. Okay? Your self-discovery is not guided in any particular direction. When we are looking for something very specific, oftentimes we miss everything that's presented to us. Although these things may be extremely beneficial, to us in one way, the next way, or multiple ways, we miss the whole picture because we don't see the thing that we came looking for sitting on the surface. The answer to what we came looking for may be found somewhere in the context of this other material that may present itself more lucidly. Okay? It's out there. But we are not acknowledging it because it's just not standing out. It's not jumping out at us. It's not making itself the primary target, the primary or the focal point of, discussion, presentation. So that is what I want to invite you guys to do. To be lost, to not know it all, to be curious about what lies ahead for you, to be curious about what things you can learn today, to be curious about where life might take you if you just let go and let yourself float, to be curious about what lies on the other end of that failure. To be curious about what lies on the other end of great success that you wasn't anticipating. These things can set us up for the major come-ups in life. These things can help us achieve greatness in life that we never knew we were capable of. And personally, I think that's important. I think it's really important. I think it's really important that we are allowing ourselves to be lost, to be curious, to be vulnerable, to find new things to embark upon in life, to discover new ways of relating to one another, to discover who we are, how we are, and who we're growing into, because we're constantly evolving as people. And I told you growth is inevitable, but only those people who mature through those experiences are the ones who remain and continue to grow in elevation. Okay, so I invite you to be lost today. I invite you to be curious today. I invite you to be you today, and I invite you to be true to you today. July is a month of warmth, sun, vacations for most people. It's a month that people typically embark on new journeys or existing journeys that brought them joy previously or in previous years. But it's also a month of significant loss, and we don't necessarily pay attention to that piece. Okay? Okay, Jaden. I'm sorry. I think we have to allow ourselves to be the best version of us that we can be, and we can't be the best version of us if we're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, allowing ourselves to be lost so that we can discover these pieces of us that we are blind to initially, because we can't see everything. And even if we could see everything, we can't see everything all at once. Half of the picture has to be blurred in order for us to see 180 degrees, of this comprehensive 3D image of life. So I want you guys to think about that. And I want you to think about some of the losses that you have experienced this summer. I want you to think about some of the gains you've experienced this summer. I want you to think about the potential growth that you have for this summer. I want you to think about the potential growth that you have moving towards the fall. I want you to think about all of the experiences that have set you up for success this year. And I want you to ask yourself, am I being 100% true to who and how I am, so that I can learn how to be the best version of myself on a consistent basis? Because we're supposed to be learning this thing constantly. I always talk about the value of an honest self-reflection on a weekly basis. If you're not already doing that, start. The value of meditating. If you're not already doing that, start. If you don't know how to do that, talk to a spiritual wellness coach. Talk to a psychotherapist who specializes in spiritual health and wellness. I think the most important thing about everything that I do is that I have a passion for this. Whomever you speak to, make sure they're passionate about their work and they're not there just for the compensation. If you're only there for financial compensation in whatever it is that you're doing, you have now increased the likelihood that whatever services that you are delivering could not be 100% delivered in the capacity in which that person may need the deliverance of those services to be. Because then you only have the professional aspect, you're not connected. You're no longer fully engaged with that person in order to deliver the type of outcome that they may need. So that's that piece. Now, I want to delve into the meat of sort of trying to make sense of schizophrenia spectrum disorder. So schizophrenia, for most of you who are familiar with it, is most known for the double bind theory. So it's known to have been developed in families or by families. It's a family systems maintained disorder in its just core essence, right? In understanding how people can be conflicted with their messages. Not only what we say, but how we say what we say can be taken in 100% in its original context. So it's important to understand that messages are not delivered only orally or only written, but there is a body language. People are reading what you're writing and how you articulate the words that you're writing, how you structure your sentences. If we're talking about internet etiquette, they're structuring whether or not it's in all caps. All of this information is to be taken by heart by the receiver. And it's processed, by them based on the deliverance. Schizophrenia, we're looking for people who are suffering with hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech, negative behaviors. And negative behaviors are those things that are, when we're looking at the context of a person's culture, these are things that are outside of the scope of acceptable behavior for that particular culture, or normative behavior in that particular culture. So if the majority of people are not seeing and hearing the things that you're seeing and hearing, if the majority of people see that you are doing things that are not your cultural norm, and also, more importantly, your individual norm, because you are now different than what you normally function as. Also, one of the negative behaviors that I like to bring to people's attention is sometimes people just sit there with a flat affect, stare into space. They're there physically, but they're not cognitively there and aware of what's going on. We'll see functionality decrease. We'll see people who no longer desire to be intimately engaged in the things that they are intimately engaged in on a regular basis that are a part of who they are. What are some of the other things that I think is really, really important for people to pay attention to when it comes to identifying people who are schizophrenic? Okay, so what I think is really important is that people understand the difference. Schizophreniform disorder, it's also, it mimics all of the symptoms that I just mentioned for schizophrenia. However, the time constraint. For people who are schizophrenic, typically they've maintained their symptoms for about 6 months or so, and there's consistency in majority of all of the behaviors. And of course, you have to have the first 3, which are hallucinations, and hallucinations and delusions. Also, disorganized speech or disorganized thinking is something that we see consistent in people who are schizophrenic. I think even though they have moved the depersonalization or derealization piece from maintaining or being a requirement of diagnosing schizophrenia, people tend to be depersonalized or removed from the people in their here and now. And of course, the derealization part is pretty given. What that means is they're not really aware of the here and now. Okay? So what they see as real may not be real, and that speaks to the delusions and hallucinations as well. It's just so much to schizophrenia, and oftentimes I see people saying, oh, I have schizophrenia and bipolar. The thing about schizophrenia is that in order for it to be diagnosed, bipolar has to be ruled out. So you don't qualify for another disorder if you have schizophrenia, spectrum disorder. Other psychotic disorders or other mental illnesses that may be due to substance use and abuse and those types of things, even though there's an indicator for schizophrenia symptoms or schizophreniform disorder due to substance use, you don't have the two co-occurring per se. If you really kind of look at the specifiers in this, if you're really diagnosing the people based on all of the symptomology and all of the things being in alignment, you won't have that overlap. And that's for the professionals. For people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, for people who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder, whether it's 1 type, 2 type, manic type, or major depressive episode type, MDE, I think it's really important that you check back with your diagnosing professional in order to have, first of all, a full and comprehensive overview or overlook and understanding of what it is that you're having to deal with. Because disorders are not who we are, okay? Mental disorders are not who we are as people. Those are some of the roadblocks that we have to deal with in order for us to maintain functionality in life. People who suffer with schizophrenia, who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, oftentimes um, struggle with the disorganized speech pattern part because they're talking about one thing and then the next moment they're talking about something else, and sometimes it's really, really difficult to bring them back to the here and now, even if they're redirected. And we see that with people with bipolar disorder as well. Sometimes they have to be redirected, but they come right back to it. They're able to, but oftentimes people with schizophrenia, they're not able to do that. You might hear a lot of mumbling. They may think that they're somewhere else, but they're not. They're here in front of you. They may think someone else is in the room and you can't see someone else in the room. And it's really important that you get these people the help that they need, because they're people like we're people and we're all connected. And it's about recognizing that they need help when they're in a crisis and they need help. And, giving them the help they need without judgment, because everybody goes through something at some point. Their thing may be great to you. It may be greater than what you've gone through based on your perception. But I'm sure if you ask them about some of the things that you go through, those things may be, extremely huge from their purview. It may be greater than the things that they've gone through. So it's a perceptual based thing. And I think if we normalize the fact that human beings struggle with these mental disorders on an everyday basis, in a consistent basis, we will have a greater understanding of what it is that people are going through when they're faced with these various disorders. And I encourage people, if they don't already know or have that awareness, I encourage you to continue to do the research. Schizophrenia is sort of like my specialty because it's something that I've studied for years, and it's something that I specialize in because I have a passion for understanding the way a person who struggles with schizophrenia, the way their mind works, the way their mind processes, and awareness of these things that they're going through. It's also like a brief psychotic disorder, people that are aware of the fact that they're going through this and that this is not real, and, making that line of delineation between the people who don't know that, okay, this isn't real. So it's just all of that is worth you guys taking a look at. I always like to kind of briefly go into various disorders so that you guys can understand kind of a glimpse from inside of the mind of the person struggling with the disorder, what that piece is like, and also how to recognize some of the signs and symptoms that may be indicative of a person who is struggling with that disorder. That could be off their meds, or even a person who's not been diagnosed yet. Typically, we see schizophrenia diagnosis in the latter stages of, adolescence to young adulthood. It's typically the diagnostic category is from, people that are like 17, 18 to maybe 35, because typically we've caught it by then. But what is more important is the length of time necessary for a person to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. They would have had to have the symptoms, symptomatic behavior for a minimum of 6 months. And people with schizophreniform disorder, they've not had it for that long. We also see the symptoms having been maintained for a consistent week, a couple of months. For those people with schizophrenia, they would have had to have, their psychotic episode, and then in the psychotic episodes would be the hallucinations and delusions and that sort of thing. But they would have had to maintain these things for a certain length of time, and that's what's really important, that we understand the difference. Okay, so that is the context of everything that I intended to discuss this particular month. I want to invite you guys again to become comfortable with being lost, living in your truth, and for you working professionals out there, I encourage you guys before the summer is over, take your kids to work. Let them see what it's like to live in the life of the parent, and to see what you do, regardless of what it is that you do. That is my parenting tip for the month. I think it's really important. Instead of me doing a relationship tip, and I had one that I was going to respond to, but I will send you a private message separately. I think it's really important that, we as parents stay connected to our kids in a way that teaches them that, okay, we have to work and support our families in this particular way, and this is what I do for work, this is what I do in my free time. Let them kind of see what your life looks like when you're not in the home with them, when they're at school typically, and they don't see the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. And I think that increases the level of appreciation that children have for their parents and what their parents are doing. So that's all I've got. I know I've been long-winded today, and typically I try to stay under 30 minutes, and I'm a little bit over now. And that's all I've got, you guys. I hope that this has been a beneficial segment for you guys. Informative is what I intended to tailor this particular thing towards. And if you guys want to hear more about this particular month's theme, I invite you to visit the Anchor podcast that I did around, surrounded around being comfortable with being lost and vulnerable, which was at the very beginning of the month. For those of you who are following me on the various podcasts, I am now featured on pretty much all of them. Just if you Google Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson podcast, it should come up on iTunes, Google Play, and all the rest of the platforms as well. I invite you guys to listen to that. I do more frequent interactions there. Of course, it's not video-based. It's more like radio-based, but you can listen to me on your way to work, right? So that is all that I have today. I hope that you guys have an amazing and a productive rest of your day, wherever you are and whatever you are doing. Make sure that you include passion behind the things that you do from day to day. Take care.